The air inside the Adams processing plant tasted like failure. It was a thick, cloying scent, burnt sugar, mixed with the acrid tang of overheated metal and the sour note of panic. I stood at the edge of the loading dock, looking down at the chaos on the floor, and adjusted the cuffs of my bespoke Italian suit. It was a nervous habit, a lingering tic from the days when I was just a dirt-poor kid from the valley trying to look like he belonged in a boardroom. Now, I owned half the agricultural contracts in the state, but the imposter syndrome still sat on my shoulder like a heavy, judgmental bird. I checked my watch. 2 p.m. I was exactly on time. Below me, the noise was deafening. A main conveyor belt was screeching in mechanical agony, a high-pitched metal-on-metal grind that made my teeth ache. Steam hissed violently from a pressure valve on the pasteurization unit that looked like it was seconds away from becoming a projectile. Workers were scrambling, shouting over the din, but there was no coordination. It was a ship without a captain, spinning in a storm. Then I saw her, Penelope Adams. I'd seen her picture in the trade journals, the organic queen of the valley, they called her. In print, she looked invincible, polished, untouchable. In person, she looked like she was holding up the collapsing ceiling with her bare hands. She stood in the center of the fray, wearing a white lab coat over a silk blouse that had likely cost more than my first car. Her hair, a sleek blonde bob in the photos, was escaping its pins, wild strands sticking to her forehead with sweat. She was shouting orders, her voice cracking but distinct over the mechanical screaming. "Shut it down!" she yelled at a man in a greasy jumpsuit who was freezing up near the control panel. "Jerry, kill the line! Shut it all down before we lose the batch!" "I can't, Miss Adams," Jerry yelled back, his hands hovering uselessly over the board, his face pale. "The emergency override is jammed. The solenoid won't disengage." "Then pull the manual release. It's too hot. I can't get near it." I didn't think. I didn't calculate the ROI or check my schedule. I didn't worry about the dry cleaning bill. I just moved. I dropped my leather briefcase on a pallet of crates and vaulted over the safety rail onto the platform. I knew this machinery. Before I was a tycoon, before I was Mr. Hernandez, I was a mechanic. I'd spent my 20s fixing ancient processing lines with duct tape, baling wire, and prayers. I knew the anatomy of these beasts better than I knew my own tax returns. I pushed past the frozen workers, my dress shoes slipping slightly on the slick concrete. The heat coming off the boiler was intense, a physical wall of temperature that hit me as I approached the manual release wheel. It was a rusted iron valve, seized by years of neglect and heat expansion. "Move!" I barked at Jerry, shouldering him aside. I grabbed the wheel. The metal seared my palms instantly, burning through the thin layer of adrenaline. I gritted my teeth, planting my feet wide, and braced my shoulder against the housing. I ignored the ruin of my jacket. I ignored the heat. I focused on the physics torque, leverage, friction. "Come on," I growled, feeling the veins in my neck pop. I hauled down with everything I had. My muscles strained, the fabric of my suit protesting, but I didn't let go. With a groan of tortured metal that rivaled the conveyor belt, the wheel turned. Once, twice, the hissing stopped abruptly. The screeching belt shuddered, slowed, and groaned to a halt. The sudden silence crashed into the room, heavy and absolute, ringing in my ears. I stood there for a moment, breathing hard, my hands throbbing. I straightened up, wiping a smear of black grease onto my trousers without caring. I turned to find the entire floor staring at me, and in the center of them, Penelope Adams. Her eyes were wide, a startling shade of green, and filled with a volatile mixture of relief, shock, and fury. She marched up to me, her heels clicking sharply on the concrete. She was shorter than I expected, but she radiated enough energy to power the whole plant. "Who are you?" she demanded. She didn't say thank you. She didn't ask if I was hurt. She asked for identification. I liked her. Immediately. "Andre Hernandez?" I said, offering a hand. I realized too late it was covered in soot and rust. I pulled it back, putting it in my pocket. I had an appointment. 2 p.m. Regarding the capital injection proposal. She blinked, the adrenaline fading into confusion. You're the money guy? The Hernandez Agritech guy?" "I prefer strategic partner," I said, keeping my voice low and calm. It was a trick I learned early when the room is loud. Get quiet. It forces people to lean in. It forces them to listen. She looked at my ruined suit. She looked at the silent, steaming machine. She looked back at my face. She let out a breath that sounded like a sob she refused to release, turning it into a cough. "Well, Mr. Hernandez," she said, her voice trembling just slightly, "you just saved my strawberry preserve line. But I think you ruined your suit. That's Italian wool, isn't it?" "Suits are replaceable," I said, checking the scorched fabric on the cuff. "Inventory isn't, and neither are fingers. If that boiler had blown..." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a second, the CEO mask slipped. I saw the exhaustion etched into the fine lines around her eyes. I saw the fear that she was trying desperately to hide from her employees. "My uncle," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the glass-walled office overlooking the floor. "He told me not to take the meeting. He said you were a shark who would smell blood in the water and tear us apart." I looked up at the office window. An older man was watching us, his face a mask of disapproval. He held a phone to his ear, staring down like a king in a tower who refused to come down to the mud. "I am a shark," I admitted. "But I only eat what's dead. This..." I gestured to the quiet factory, to the workers who were starting to move again, checking gauges. "This is still breathing." "Barely. It's the heart," she whispered, stepping closer so the workers wouldn't hear. "The main logic processor. It keeps failing. The timing is off. If I can't fulfill the Whole Foods order by Friday, I trigger the penalty clause in my family trust. My uncle takes control. He wants to liquidate. He wants to sell it for parts." I looked at the machine. It wasn't just a machine to her. It was her life, her father's legacy, her daughter's future. I knew what it was like to build something from the ground up, to bleed for it, and to be terrified that someone with more money and less heart would take it away. "I can fix it," I said. She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You just turned a wheel, Mr. Hernandez. You didn't fix the computer. The motherboard is fried. The parts are in Germany, and they have a 6-week lead time." "I don't need parts," I said. "I need a bypass. I can reroute the logic controller to the auxiliary unit using a bridge sequence. It won't be pretty. It won't be permanent. But it will run for 5 days, long enough to fill your order." "You're a CEO," she said, skeptical. "You sit in boardrooms. You don't fix machines." "I was a mechanic before I was a CEO," I said. "I fixed tractors when I was 12. I fixed processing lines when I was 20. And I don't like bullies." "Your uncle looks like a bully." She stared at me. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of her decision. She was weighing her pride against her survival. "If you touch it and it breaks," she said, "I have nothing. No company. No home." "If you don't touch it," I countered, "you have nothing anyway. You miss the deadline. You lose control." She closed her eyes for a second. I saw her chest rise and fall. When she opened them, they were clear. "Do it," she said. We worked until midnight. I stripped off my ruined jacket and rolled up my sleeves, revealing the forearms I usually kept hidden under Egyptian cotton. I sent Jerry home. He was useless in a crisis, and pulled the schematics up on my tablet. Penelope didn't leave. She didn't retreat to her office. She stayed right there in the trenches. She tied her hair back with a rubber band, kicked off her heels, and put on a pair of safety boots she kept in a locker. We didn't talk about business models or equity splits. We talked about voltage and resistance. There's a language in work, a rhythm of effort and result that cuts through the noise of social niceties. "Wrench," I'd say, my head buried in the wiring cabinet. "Here," she'd reply, slapping the 10mm into my hand before I even looked up. "Light. Got it." Her wrist trembled from holding the flashlight steady for 3 hours straight, but the beam never drifted. When the final bolt finally caught, she let out a small breath like she'd been holding it for an hour. By 10 p.m., we were both covered in grease. We were tired. We were starving. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving a dull ache in my back and a hunger that felt like a hole. "We need food," she said, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a smear of black oil across her temple. It made her look remarkably human. "I'm fine," I lied. My stomach growled loudly, betraying me instantly. She smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen. Not the polite executive grimace, but a genuine expression of amusement. It transformed her face, making her look younger, softer. Come on. My house is just up the hill. I can make sandwiches. It's not Whole Foods catering, but it's calories. We walked up the dirt path to the farmhouse that sat on the ridge overlooking the plant. It was a beautiful old Victorian, painted a soft yellow, with a porch that wrapped around the front. It looked like a home, a real home, not like my glass and steel condo in the city that looked like a hotel lobby where no one actually lived. Inside, it was warm, cluttered, lived in. There were school books on the dining table, a pair of muddy sneakers by the door, a cat sleeping on the rug. "Mom?" a voice called from upstairs. "It's me, Maya," Penelope called back, her voice softening instantly. "Go back to sleep, honey. I just came to get food. Everything is okay." She turned to me, lowering her voice. "My daughter. She's 15. She worries about the plant as much as I do." We went into the kitchen. The linoleum was worn, the cabinets old but sturdy. She opened the fridge and started pulling out ingredients. She moved with efficiency, making sandwiches thick slices of sourdough, ham, sharp cheddar, pickles. We ate standing up at the counter, the silence of the house settling around us. It was intimate in a way I wasn't prepared for. "Why?" she asked suddenly, breaking the quiet. "Why what? Why are you doing this? You're a billionaire, Andre. You could buy this place out of foreclosure next week for half the price. You could just wait for me to fail and pick up the pieces. That's what a shark would do." I swallowed a bite of sandwich. I looked around the kitchen. I looked at the magnets on the fridge drawings, report cards, a photo of her and Maya laughing at the beach. "I grew up in a trailer," I said, 2 hours south of here. My dad picked fruit. My mom cleaned houses. I built my company because I wanted to be safe. I wanted to be untouchable. I wanted to make sure no one could ever evict me again. I looked at her, but somewhere along the way, I became a spreadsheet. I forgot what it felt like to build something, to save something tangible. When I saw you down there, fighting for this place, I remembered. She stopped chewing. She looked down at her hands, resting on the counter. "I haven't let anyone help me in 2 years," she whispered. The confession hung in the air, vulnerable and stark. "Not since the divorce. Not since." Everything fell apart. I'm used to doing it alone. The silence stretched between us, thick with everything we weren't saying. I put my sandwich down. I wanted to reach out, to touch her hand, but I held back. I kept my hands on the counter. "I'm not here to complicate things," I said. "I'm here to fix the machine." "I know," she said. She looked up at me. Her eyes were searching, unguarded. "But you're here, and you're helping, and I don't know what to do with that." "Let me help," I said. "We fix the plant first, then we worry about the rest." She took a breath, a long, shuddering exhale. "Okay." We finished eating in silence. But it was a comfortable silence now. We went back down to the plant. I finished the bypass wiring at 2 a.m. I reassembled the housing. I hit the start button. The machine hummed to life. It wasn't perfect. It rattled and clanked like a bag of bolts, but it ran. The logic controller engaged. The lights turned green. The belt started moving. The jars started filling with red preserve. Penelope let out a cry of joy. For a second, she looked like she was going to hug me, but she stopped herself. Instead, she leaned against the railing, her shoulders dropping 3 inches. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's just a bypass," I said, my voice gruff to hide the relief flooding my own chest. "It'll hold for a week. We need a permanent fix." "We," she repeated. She looked at me. "You said we." "I'm investing," I said. "If you'll have me. Not as a shark, as a partner." "I think I might," she said. The next week was a blur of controlled chaos. I sent a 1-page bridge note to her email, signed digitally, then initiated the transfer. It was enough to cover payroll and keep the suppliers happy for a month. I moved my operations to a motel in town. I was at the plant every day at 6 a.m. I wasn't in a suit anymore. I wore jeans, Red Wing boots, and a polo shirt. I walked the line, checking efficiency, tweaking the logistics, looking for every bleeding dollar I could save. I instituted a new inventory system on the fly. I renegotiated the shipping contracts with a phone call to a logistics VP who owed me a favor. I used every trick in my playbook to squeeze margin out of the operation. The workers were skeptical at first. They saw a suit playing dress-up. But when they saw me under the chassis of a delivery truck, changing the oil because the fleet mechanic was out sick, the atmosphere changed. I wasn't just giving orders. I was doing the work. They started to nod when I walked by. They started to trust. Penelope was everywhere. She was a force of nature, managing the front office, the suppliers, the banks. But I saw the fatigue. I saw the way she rubbed her temples when she thought no one was looking. I saw the stack of past due notices she kept in the bottom drawer. One afternoon, I found her in her office, staring at a spreadsheet on her screen. She looked pale. "What's wrong?" I asked, closing the door behind me. "The Whole Foods QA check," she said. "They flagged a pallet for label mismatch. If we don't clear it by 5 p.m., they reject the shipment." "I'll handle it," I said. "I know the regional buyer. I'll make the call." "You can't just call him," she said. "He's impossible." "Watch me," I said. I made the call. I was polite, firm, and armed with the data I'd collected all week. By 4:30 p.m., the flag was cleared. Just then, the office door banged open. It was the uncle, Frank. He was a big man, red-faced and blustering, wearing a suit that was too tight. He marched in, ignoring me completely. "I saw the books, Penny," he shouted, slamming a file onto her desk. "You're bleeding out. The trust won't stand for it. I'm calling an emergency board meeting. We're selling to Conglomerated Foods. They made an offer for the land." "Get out of my office, Frank," Penelope said, standing up. She looked small next to him, but she didn't flinch. "I'm the CEO. I handle the operations." "You're ruining your father's legacy," Frank yelled, spittle flying. "You're playing house with this mechanic in a suit. He's going to strip this place and leave you with nothing." I stood up. I didn't shout. I didn't move fast. I just unfolded myself from the chair and stepped between them. I was bigger than Frank, younger, and I had a lot more anger stored up. "Mr. Adams," I said, my voice low and dangerous, "you're trespassing on a secure facility. And you're shouting at the CEO. I suggest you leave before I call security, or before I escort you out myself." Frank looked at me. He looked at the width of my shoulders, the set of my jaw. He saw the look in my eyes, the look of a man who grew up fighting for everything he had. He stepped back. "You'll regret this," he spat at Penelope. "When you're bankrupt next week, don't come crying to me." He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. Penelope sank back into her chair. She was shaking. "He's right," she whispered. "If the Whole Foods order isn't perfect, if one jar is off, he has the votes. He'll oust me." "It won't be off," I said, "because I'm going to personally inspect every pallet." The crisis came 2 days later. It was Thursday evening. The order was due to ship on Friday morning. We were on schedule. The pallets were wrapped, the trucks were booked. Then the power went out. The lights in the plant died instantly. The hum of the refrigeration units cut out, replaced by a terrifying silence. "No," Penelope moaned. "No, no, no." She ran out onto the floor. "The refrigeration units. The finished product needs to stay at 38 degrees. It will spoil in 4 hours." I checked the main breaker. Dead. I ran outside. The whole valley was dark. A transformer had blown on the main grid miles away. This wasn't a tripped breaker. This was a county-wide failure. We didn't have a backup generator big enough for the whole plant. Just emergency lights that cast eerie, long shadows across the silent machinery. "We need a generator," I said. "A big one. Industrial grade." "Where am I going to get an industrial generator at 8 p.m. on a Thursday in a blackout?" she cried, her voice rising toward hysteria. "It's over. Frank wins." I pulled out my phone. I had 1 bar of signal. I scrolled through my contacts past the bankers and the lawyers, down to the names from my old life. "Who are you calling?" "A guy I used to know," I said. "He owes me, and he has a yard in Fresno." I walked outside for better reception. The stars were bright above the darkened valley. "Hello?" A gruff voice answered on the 3rd ring. "Sal," I said. "It's Andre. I need a favor. A big one. I need a 500 kilowatts mobile genset, and I need it in an hour." "Andre?" Sal laughed. "You haven't called in 5 years. You in trouble?" "I'm in deep," I said. "Can you do it?" "Only unit I got is on a job 2 towns over," Sal said. But the contract ends at midnight. Buy out the remaining hours, I said. Double time. I'll pay the penalty. Just get it here. On my way, Sal said. You owe me a case of that scotch you like? Done, I said. 2 cases. We rigged up a smaller backup unit to buy us time, keeping the critical sensors alive. An hour later, headlights cut through the darkness. A massive flatbed truck rolled up the driveway. On the back was a yellow generator, the size of a small house. Sal jumped out. He was a bear of a man, covered in tattoos and grease. You owe me, Hernandez, Sal grunted, slapping my shoulder. Put it on my tab, I said. We rigged it up. It took 3 hours of brutal, physical work. We had to run heavy cables, bypass the transfer switch, and ground the unit. We were sweating, cursing, bleeding knuckles. Penelope didn't stand back. She held the flashlight. She ran coffee to the crew Sal had brought. She didn't panic. She worked. At midnight, I threw the main switch. The generator roared to life, a diesel-fueled dragon. The lights flickered and came on. The hum of the refrigerators returned. A beautiful, steady drone. We did it. I slumped against the wall of the loading dock, exhausted, wiping sweat from my eyes. Penelope walked over to me. She was dirty, her hair a mess, dark circles under her eyes. She looked exhausted and unbreakable at the same time. You saved us, she said. We saved us, I corrected. You held the light. She reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were rough, calloused like mine. She laced them through my fingers. I caught the sharp smell of diesel and warm metal. Her hands were steady in mine. You're not going anywhere, are you? She asked. After this is over? Not unless you fire me, I said. I can't afford to fire you, she said. You're too valuable. And she leaned in, resting her forehead against mine for a brief second, then pulled back. It was enough. Stay, she whispered. Just stay. The shipment went out on Friday morning. It was perfect. On Monday, I walked into the board meeting. I was wearing my blue suit again. It was pressed, sharp, a suit of armor for the battlefield. Frank was there, sitting at the head of the table, looking smug. He had the papers ready. We're selling, he announced. Penny has failed. The financials are unsustainable. I have a motion on the floor. Actually, I said, stepping forward. She hasn't failed. I placed a folder on the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped in front of Frank. This is a certified bank draft, I said, paying off the outstanding debt to the trust. In full. Including the penalty interest, we filed the initial notice and escrow instructions this morning, final shares pending verification enough to block the forced sale. Frank went pale. He opened the folder. His hands shook. What? Where did she get this? From her new partner, I said. I looked around the table at the board members. I saw the recognition in their eyes. They knew the name. Hernandez. I'm Andre Hernandez, I said, CEO of Hernandez Agri Group. I've acquired a 49% stake in Adams Organics. Miss Adams retains 51% and full operational control. My legal team filed the papers this morning. I leaned on the table, projecting calm, absolute power. Any questions? Silence. Frank stood up, spluttering. You can't. This is family business. You can't just buy your way in. It's business, I said. And business is good. We just secured a 5-year contract with Whole Foods, extended distribution. We're projecting a 20% growth next quarter with my supply chain integration. If you sell now, you lose millions. Penelope stood up. She looked at the board members, then at Frank. Then she turned to me. This is Andre Hernandez, she said clearly. My partner in the company and the person I'm choosing to keep in my life. Questions regarding operations can go through me. Questions regarding logistics can go through him. Frank looked at her, then at me. He sat down, defeated. Motion to adjourn? She asked. Seconded, I said. We walked out of the boardroom together, leaving the stunned silence behind us. You bought my debt? She said, stopping in the hallway. That's a lot of money. You risked a lot? It's an investment, I said. The return I want is simple honesty in the paperwork and one calm dinner after you've slept. Oh? She raised an eyebrow. Is that all? Maybe, I said. And I want to meet Maya properly. No suits. No crisis. She looked at me. I have a daughter. She has homework. It's not glamorous. I'm good at math, I said, and I make excellent tacos. My grandmother's recipe. She laughed. You're persistent. I'm strategic, I said. Okay, she said. Dinner. Tacos. But you have to promise not to fix anything in the house unless I ask. Deal, I said. But that loose step on the porch is a hazard. Andre. Fine. Deal. She reached into her bag and pulled out something small. It was the 10 millimeters wrench I had used on the first night. She held it out to me. You left this, she said. I kept it, just in case. I took the wrench. It felt heavy and solid in my hand. A symbol of everything we had built in the last 4 weeks. Keep it, I said, closing her fingers around it. We might need it. We walked out into the sunlight. The valley was green and golden below us. The plant was humming in the distance, a steady, rhythmic heartbeat that sounded like a future. I took her hand. She squeezed back. I wasn't the boy from the trailer anymore. And I wasn't the lonely tycoon in the glass tower. I was a partner. I was a builder. And for the first time in a long time, I was home. The end. Closing thoughts. The core lesson. I learned that true worth isn't in what you own, but in what you can build and protect. You don't have to carry the world alone. Strength is knowing who to let into your fortress. Next week, we finalize the merger, sign the new distribution deal, and I teach Maya how to change a tire. Engagement? Please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this.